Now joining us, two former Congresswomen, Donna Edwards, a Democrat from Maryland, and Barbara Comstock, a Republican from Virginia. And they served together as co-chairs of Issue One's National Council on Election Integrity. Thank you both for coming on. Congresswoman Edwards, 2 years after Roe was overturned, we now have this patchwork of anti-abortion laws across dozens of states. How do you see the landscape shaping the November election?
Well, I think the landscape has been forever altered after the Dobbs decision. I mean, we see this patchwork across the country. We see some states that already had access to abortion and legal access to abortion are doubling down on protecting providers, on providing services to out-of-state women who are seeking an abortion. And I think that it has changed the political calculation. Abortion is a motivating issue, and I think for Democrats in particular, that who had largely not paid attention to abortion rights during the election cycle, this is a defining issue. And I think the Biden campaign, Biden-Harris campaign, are right on the money when it comes to doubling down on protecting abortion rights.
Congresswoman Comstock, just this past weekend, former President Trump took credit for overturning Roe. He credited his conservative Supreme Court justice picks. Take a listen to what he said about abortion.
Getting it back to the states puts the question where it belongs, with the vote of the people, and over time, it will all work out. It's working out right now, but it's all going to work out, and it's where everybody wanted it, including the legal scholars, but it's where everybody wanted it to be.
Is this really where everybody wanted it to be? Because the latest polling shows the majority of Americans believe abortion should be legal in all or most cases, but that is not reflected in many states.
No, like so many things, Donald Trump doesn't understand, kind of basic things about pregnancy, about the law. And I think the real problem for Republicans is that the laws that have been enacted enacted by a lot of these MAGA people like, and are being enforced by people like Ken Paxton in Texas. And one of the things that I think is really effective in this new ad that you just showed is that they're talking to a wider group of people. I mean, women who miscarry, who want to have their pregnancies, who may consider themselves pro-life or maybe in the middle on the abortion issue. These are people who want to have their babies and now find themselves with their health care threatened, because if you're in one of these 21 states who have these strict abortion laws, like this woman who couldn't get her health care because they won't, until your life is in danger, they won't give you a D&C, which is what the normal, if you have you're going through a miscarriage and you might need a D&C because you have an infection or the baby has died and there's no way that the baby is going to be able to survive. This kind of care is no longer available. So I think it's important that the message get bigger than abortion and that it be understood by both pro-life or people in the middle, that because of the hash that Trump and the MAGA world has made of this whole issue, is that there's a much bigger picture here that is being missed. And it's birth control, it's IVF, and of course it's women's health. And I think what's also effective in this ad is they highlighted that a convicted felon is now going to be making these decisions. And they're talking about convicting doctors for giving these women their health care. And in Idaho, where they also have a very strict ban, there was a woman who had her water had broken, she had an infection. And in the case there, they were saying she was either going to have an amputation of a limb or a hysterectomy because they would not give her the health care. I guess in that case, the baby was not going to be able to survive, but because death wasn't imminent, they wouldn't give her the health care. That is not pro-life. That makes no sense. And this whole interference that has not been really resolved. I think there needs to be a moratorium now. And I think the pro-life, the pro-choice community needs to stand back. I mean, the pro-life community is losing because this has been handled so poorly.
Congresswoman Edwards, again, a majority of Americans support some form of abortion rights, but Trump is still trying to tap into that conservative Christian base of voters who oppose abortion on every level. What kind of bet is he making there? And could it work for him politically?
Well, I mean, look, Donald Trump is a liar. He's going to say whatever it takes to motivate his base, to get them engaged. I mean, his messaging now on abortion is all over the place. He's not for an abortion ban. He is for a national abortion ban. He expresses support for IVF, but at the same token, he expressed support for what Alabama did to limit IVF. He is just all over the map, and I think that right now, if that is his base, then he has to motivate them to show up, because all of those suburban women that we talk about, young people, young women especially, are supportive of abortion rights, and the majority of American people are. And when you have these ballot questions that are going to be on the ballot, they are going to win. They are going to motivate voters. And I think Democrats' bet is that is going to increase turnout for them at the top of these tickets, and really all the way through. So I just don't know what Trump's strategy is here. If he's got those people, he's certainly not getting any more by messaging that is so down to the bone when it comes to these conservative Christian right voters. There's nobody else that he's appealing to.
And yet, it does seem like he maybe is making no one satisfied on this issue. He's indicated he would not sign a federal abortion ban. Listen to what one woman attending the Faith and Freedom Conference in Washington, D.C. this weekend told NBC News.
It's very disheartening. He has called himself in the past the most pro-life president, and then we're hearing these comments saying that he supports a restriction at a later week, when most abortions happen before that point anyways. There isn't a candidate that's currently one of the mainstream parties that is 100% anti-abortion.
So, Congresswoman Comstock, if Trump is not going far enough for the conservative base, but he's still out of step with most voters, where does that really leave him?
Well, actually, that woman got it. Trump only cares about his political viability. He doesn't care. He doesn't have a position on abortion. What he cares about is what gets him votes. So in Arizona, he asked Republicans to repeal their ban because he was worried he was going to, that would hurt him in Arizona. But if you're in a really, really red state where they've totally banned abortion, he doesn't care because he doesn't have to worry about losing that state. So if he were to become president, then all bets are off, because then he doesn't care what happens to women. And so that is the threat of having a convicted felon and somebody who doesn't care about anybody but himself be president, who doesn't understand these issues and has no sense of nuance, doesn't care about those babies, doesn't care about the moms. Look at how he treated his own wife when she was pregnant and home with a baby. So listen, Donald Trump is a self-serving narcissist, convicted felon. Do not trust him on this issue, no matter what position you have, because he's always out for himself.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.